Hurricane Erin has changed dramatically in just the past 24 hours. It has grown much larger, and while the center will remain offshore, this storm is going to bring dangerous conditions from rip currents to high surf to tropical storm force winds to the Bahamas and even parts of the U.S. East Coast. In today's video, we'll break down where Erin is right now, what's changed since yesterday, and what you need to know for the week ahead. At the time of the recording of this video on Sunday night, Hurricane Erin is just located north of Puerto Rico. This storm has actually doubled, almost nearly tripled in its size over the last 48 hours. On Saturday, it was a small but very powerful Category 5 hurricane. Today, it is a large Category 3 hurricane and may be on its way to a Category 4 strength. And the reason for the change in the intensity of the storm is that we've seen Hurricane Erin undergo this eye wall replacement. Here we see the clearly defined, but by the time we get into Sunday morning, that eye wall is disappearing, and we're watching it Sunday night redevelop much larger and less defined than it was on Saturday. Larger storms do take longer to spin back up, but Erin has the potential to become a high-end Category 4, flirt with a Category 5 again. And Puerto Rico has already seen flooding rains from Erin's outer bands. We can see here the island has been pummeled with rain band after rain band over the last 24 to 48 hours, 3 to 6 inches along most areas of the island. And the latest on Hurricane Erin shows that with winds at 125 miles per hour as of Sunday night, it is expected to continue to move in that west-northwest direction and take more of a northerly route during the day Monday into Tuesday. And as we can see, this far western edge of the cone, this is where Erin has typically moved, is that far western edge of the cone. So as it gets up here to about Wednesday afternoon, it is getting closer to those outer banks of North Carolina before it really turns off and makes its rapid acceleration back out into the central Atlantic. And let's talk our impacts. As we can see here, this is the forecasted wind gust. As we go into our Tuesday night, we're starting to see some slight wind gusts along the coast, 15, 20 miles per hour up towards Virginia Beach. But as we get to the day on Wednesday, that's when we start to see Erin's effects really start to make its way into North Carolina with some stronger wind gusts out along places like Cape Hatteras, 30, 40 miles per hour. But even inland, we could see wind gusts approaching tropical storm strength by the time we get to early Thursday morning. But by Thursday afternoon, that is all moving offshore and away from the Carolinas and Virginia. And so we can see it here on the radar map. We see Erin making its way north on our day Wednesday and then taking its trek out to sea. So it's not really going to pose an impact to land here in the United States. We will have some strong rip currents and strong waves across the East Coast, but that's going to be the major headline. And offshore, nearest the core of Hurricane Erin, could reach 100 feet in height. That's why cruise ships have gone ahead and canceled all their travel towards Bermuda for this upcoming week. And so while we have Hurricane Erin here just north of the Dominican Republic, it's going to continue to move towards the United States before eventually turning out. We also have another area of disturbed weather. This is actually an outflow from Hurricane Erin that is spinning up here in the central Atlantic. We really don't expect development from this system over the next 24 to 48 hours. In fact, the National Hurricane Center gives it less than a 10% chance of development into a tropical system. But out across the eastern Atlantic, we're already monitoring our next tropical wave that has moved off the coast of Africa. As it moves in that same general path that Erin has moved, we're going to watch for the development of this by the time we get to next weekend. Right now, there's about a 30 to 40% chance of development over the next 7 days. And this storm is projected to take slightly more southerly track Erin has taken as it's made its way across the Atlantic. And that is going to be good news for the development of the system. If it stays out of that wake of where Erin has moved, then we're going to have a little bit better water. The temperatures of the water are going to be a little more favorable for that development. But we do expect it also, as it approaches Puerto Rico, the Dominican, the Bahamas, we do expect it to take a turn to the north and northwest, as did Hurricane Erin. But where that turn occurs and how far south this storm stays is going to be key in the impacts as we get to next weekend into the following week of August. But back to Erin, model guidance is very consistent across all the hurricane models in that it will begin its northwesterly turn to the north by about Tuesday, and then by about Wednesday, Thursday, it is going to start racing off into the North Atlantic. And by the time we get towards the end of next week, we could expect this system to be in the central North Atlantic and become extratropical at that time. We do expect the storm to maintain its intensity as a Category 3 storm or higher over the next 96 hours. But after it makes its turn to the northeast, we do expect that intensity to drop to a Category 2, Category 1. And as I mentioned, by the time we get towards the end of next weekend, most models now have it as about a Category 1 or have dropped it down to tropical storm status. Outside of the tropics, we're still dealing with scattered areas of severe weather in the plains and the Midwest. The Storm Prediction Center has highlighted this area for marginal risk of severe weather from Nebraska up through the Dakotas, back through Iowa, northwest Illinois, even into southern parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin. We're not expecting tornadoes or anything overly severe in this area. The main threat is going to be hail and strong winds, winds gusting 50 to 60 miles per hour. Elsewhere across the United States, the main threat is going to be scattered thunderstorms. And that is really going to be our pattern for most of this upcoming week. No areas of organized severe weather at this time, but those daily chances of scattered severe storms across the United States. And what we're having in the upper levels of the atmosphere is we're having that ridge build across the eastern half of the United States. That's what's bringing the warm temperatures to the plains, the Ohio Valley. But here comes Erin. But as Erin makes its way toward the United States and eventually makes its turn, we're watching that area of low pressure that's making its way across northern Alberta. It's going to kind of squish the high pressure and push it back towards the west as Erin moves closer to shore, and we have this trough. So that ridge is going to retrograde, and we're going to have warmer than normal conditions across the western half of the United States for this upcoming weekend, and we have another trough making its way into the eastern half of the United States. This is going to bring refreshing, cool weather, as well as a stormy pattern for the upper plains and Great Lakes as we get into Friday and Saturday. And that pattern is going to last throughout the weekend into the last week of August. But that pattern will not last for long, because by the time we begin our September, we see yet another significant trough building across the Pacific Northwest, and that ridge of warm, hot weather has shifted to the east for places like the upper Great Lakes through the Ohio Valley. So don't think that the 90s are out of the question once we get past this coming week, because they could return as we begin the new calendar month. But let's put our map into motion across the next 48 hours. We're going to watch those scattered storms from Wisconsin through Iowa into Nebraska on our Monday. Those are going to dive to the south and east. Through the daytime heating, we're going to watch more storms fire across Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana for our Tuesday. And out in the Atlantic, we are still monitoring Hurricane Erin as it makes its way north and eventually makes its turn to the northeast. In fact, as we get towards Wednesday, we're watching scattered showers across the lower central plains into the Tennessee Valley. There goes Hurricane Erin out to sea. And we watch that strong low making its way across the Canadian provinces towards Hudson Bay. This is going to be a very strong, powerful low as it wraps that cooler air down in from Canada into the Ohio Valley as we close out our work week. So our temperatures this week are going to be warm across the central plain. 90s and 100s are going to be common. 100s across parts of Texas, 90s into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, 60s and 70s for you out in the northeast. As we make our way to our Wednesday, we see that warmth continuing, starting to retrograde just a little bit. High temperatures, triple digits for eastern Montana into the Dakotas, even into southern Canada. Parts of Manitoba, you could be at 102 for your Wednesday. 100s across Texas into the desert southwest. But we're starting to see that cooler air start to filter in. 70s and 80s across the Great Lakes, even 60s for parts of Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And as we go into Friday, we're going to watch that warm weather, try to make a return to the Ohio Valley, but stay across the central plains. And look, the deserts in the interior of California, you're heating up 110 to 115 for your Friday. But by Sunday, that northwesterly flow, that trough has made its way into the Ohio Valley. High temperatures here could be in the upper 50s for parts of northeastern Minnesota into the UP of Michigan, 60s across most of Wisconsin, 70s through the Ohio Valley, the real warmth 90s down in the Dixie Alley down through Florida. Texas, you're still holding on to those triple digits, but the deserts, you're remaining warm, 115 to 120. But as I mentioned, we get to that last week of August, we're going to have cooler than normal temperatures likely across a good portion of the United States, with the real above normal temperatures centered across the Gulf states and along the south. Even out in the Pacific Northwest, where that ridge has retrograded, we're going to see above normal temperatures for parts of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho to close out to the month of August. But that won't last for long. But in terms of our precipitation for the upcoming week, it's going to be far and few between. We see a lot of green on this map. That's indications of less than a half of an inch of rain for this upcoming week. Where we see all these blues, that's less than an inch of rain. So we don't really see a lot of reds or those yellows indicating rainfall over 1 or 2 inches of rain, except where we see the path of Hurricane Erin. And that's staying well offshore, so we're not going to see flooding conditions along the east coast. The heaviest rain is going to stay out to sea. So to wrap it up today, Hurricane Erin has grown much larger and remains very powerful. The Bahamas will feel impacts first, then the U.S. East Coast will see mainly strong winds and some rip currents, but the Outer Banks will feel those tropical storm force winds by the time we get to our Wednesday. Behind Erin, we're watching yet another tropical wave that could pose more of a concern for the United States as we get into next week, and we'll be talking about that in future videos. Thank you so much for watching today. If you're new here, click that subscribe button, and if Erin shifts west again, I'll be back with another update before Wednesday. Otherwise, I will see you in the next forecast.